Art and architecture are the crown jewels of society, and the art society leave behind and tell a lot about how the people lived and what was important to them. We will get to have a real comprehensive look into the world of art. This museum is so huge, it took me over 5 hours to go through. So obviously you're going to have to move more quickly through the museum. You will walk through by periods. If your group starts on level 1, just go to the main area by the columns and diner and go up north, and then you'll head left to the Egyptian area. This will take you through the Greek, Roman, and Christian art and into the English pottery. Upstairs, you can start at the East Hall and find the Chinese art and some of the oldest funeral and sacrificial vessels in existence. They are similar to Egyptian art in that they believe that they could take material comforts into the world, and you will find rooms that have things associated with those tombs. Now, the Nelson Atkins Museum tour, we're going to start by talking about the Egyptian art. Now, the Egyptian room that I just talked about has a bunch of different artifacts, but what I really want you to focus here on is that you'll see a real-life mummy, and in the bottom corner, you'll see that what you place on the mummy. You'll see the actual coffin, and then you'll see the outer coffin in which it goes into. They're all highly decorated. But what's most interesting to me is that they took this Ushabti figurines, and you'll see all of these hundreds of figurines that they would put inside the tombs, and those would be representative of their servants and the things that they wanted to take back with them. They actually believed that they could take those with them in the next life, which I thought was really interesting. But what you'll see in the middle of this screen here is there's actually a baker that had their name on there. So they loved their baker so much they wanted to make sure that they could take him with them. The next room takes you into the Roman, the Greek era, and the Egyptian era, when it really talks about how they portrayed power in their artwork, and you can locate different symbols like the wings on the Mesopotamia King Palace relief on the left here, that the wings believed that they could be supernatural. And then you can see the Egyptian pharaoh headdress, the sun gods, and see if you can even locate any of the Greek mythology figures. Can you guess who this head is on the bottom right? It's Hercules. As you go into the next room, you're going to see Greek change to Roman sculptures. Later on, they start to become more realistic and less idealized. You'll see like wrinkles on the scrumpy old man, and you'll see an arch that kind of is the beginning of what we see as Christianity art, which is going to take you straight into the altarpiece and the Christian area. Here you'll see this huge cloister that was disassembled in France, and cloisters are a place where monks and nuns could walk in contemplation. So as you're walking through this area, you might want to see how you feel about it as you walk through it and see if you can feel contemplative. You'll also see some beautiful stained glass, traditionally from different churches across the world. Another thing that's really interesting is you'll see all these little pictures of Mary and baby Jesus. But the baby Jesus is a homuncular big man Jesus, and they're kind of ugly. But what you'll see is that they wanted to portray him as a man, not as an infant, because of who he was. As you go through the next era, you'll see the English pottery. Cool English pottery. They're amazing. And what's interesting is that this is actually modern pottery, but it all reflects ancient pottery from the past. You'll see like Egyptian and ideas from the Greek era, which is kind of fun to see. Upstairs, you'll go into the modern, actually on that main floor, you'll see the Baroque room, which has a lot of these dramatic lighting paintings, and one of the crown jewels of the museum is a Caravaggio. And Caravaggio was an artist who was the first to develop this chiaroscuro, this beautiful way to show extreme lights and darks. He also painted from live figures, which was a new idea. Later, when you go upstairs, you're going to go see some early Chinese art. And here in these 3 pictures here, you'll see that some of these ideas was the same as the Egyptian art when they would take these into the funerary area tombs, and they would take these things back with them. Like this one on the left was a person who was processing grain so that they could enjoy bread in heaven. And ritual offerings were a really important part of their culture. And so you see a 2,500-year-old vessel, a sacrificial vessel on the right. And how they would talk to God, up above, you'll see these bones in this room. And what they would do is they would ask a question, they would carve it in the bones, and then they would throw the bones in the fire, and then they would watch where it would crack, and then they would be able to read the cracks and get answers to their questions. So some interesting also facts about Chinese art is you'll see a lot of work in jade. Jade, here on the left, you'll see carved. It's so hard that it really cannot be chiseled out like marble and other different stones. And so they actually had to grind it, which is crazy hard to do. So anytime you see really detailed work like this, you just realize how hard it was to make. A lot of the wealthy tradesmen and Chinese people would show their importance by the number of funerary statues in their sculpture. And they would take things like horses and other items and then put them in the tomb. You can see the tomb in the background here. The larger the statues, the more wealthy they were. Also, as you go through the Chinese area, we just finished our mask unit. You will see some Chinese theater mask next to the kimonos. Also in the Chinese this is kind of like later Chinese art, you'll see some furniture, which is really fun. These furnitures were made without any nails. There was just all dovetail joints that were assembled together, so they're very precise. And you'll get to see an ancient Chinese folding chair, which is pretty cool. And a lot of the paintings that you see in there, you'll see that has like a red mark on there. That symbol is the artist's seal. And as you're leaving that late Chinese art room, you'll see at the very end, here on the top right corner in my picture, you'll see a grinding stone, which is how they made their ink. And you'll also get to see a real carved seal, which is how they would sign their name. As you're going out into the hallway, here on the bottom right, you'll see a Chinese cricket pet collection. Chinese collecting crickets was kind of the thing to do in the Chinese culture. You'll see cages, homes, little food trays that they built for them, all sorts of beautiful items here. And just know that they actually still have crickets as pets out there. So that's kind of interesting. As you leave that area and you go into the last part of the Chinese room over from the funerary area, you will see this beautiful Buddhist temple that was disassembled and actually reassembled into the museum. It was designed for this special area. And when you, there is a statue. As you're kind of looking straight ahead, you'll see the statue of Guanyin, which was a person who had reached enlightenment but stayed on earth to help others reach enlightenment. And there's many statues of Buddhists that are in these temples. As you look up into the ceiling on the right, you'll see there's the ceiling, and there's like 12 dragons on there, which are a symbol of protection. As you move out, and you'll go into another room that's into an early realism. There's some really intricate paintings. And these are actually, you'll see 2 really large paintings of detailed flowers, which are actually portfolio pieces, which artists would put together to show how good of artists they are. And I want you to just get in there and get up close and see all the kinds of different things and details that you can find in there. There's bugs, detailed water droplets. They're amazing. And as you're going out and you're in that foyer area, as you're going, that main stairs, you'll see this really interesting lion. And it's actually a 2,500-year-old Greek sculpture that they imaged and actually found out that it had been broken in several pieces. And someone had tried to fix it with iron rods, but later on it rusted. And so they replaced them with stainless steel. But what I thought was interesting is that I literally cannot hardly see where the breaks were. But I thought, check it out. See if you can see where the breaks were. It's pretty amazing. In the modern art, Impressionism and Cubism room, you will see some of the most famous artists and painters that I know of that are in this room. Now, one of the Monet's paintings that if you've been to the museum before, the large one, it's not there right now. It'll be back in about 6 months. But you are going to see some Monet paintings. And here on the right, you'll see these 2 Monet paintings that are really famous. And on the left, you're going to see a Van Gogh. Now, what's interesting about this picture on the left, this is one of Van Gogh's paintings, is that they actually looked under a microscope and found remnants of a grasshopper wing embedded into the paint. So Van Gogh, obviously he painted outdoors, but I thought that was really interesting. You'll also see some pointillism paintings, which are in the room by a really famous artist named Paul Signac. And other impressionists, especially with the pointillism style, they believed that the more vibrant colors were created using having 2 separate colors and having your eye mix the color by standing away. On the east side of that room, you're going to see some Picassos, and he was the person who developed Cubism. A lot of the paintings are really abstracted into geometric shapes, and he was heavily influenced by African art. Here are some fun things that you may want to check out as you're going along on that level. You're going to see in the hallway the Super Bowl challenge. Now, we just won the Super Bowl, and I thought it was really interesting that the Art Museum from Philadelphia, they put on a wager with the Kansas City Art Museum, and because we won, Philadelphia had to loan us one of their Thomas Atkins paintings. So you'll see that in the hall. He was a famous American painter and watercolor artist. Also, you may want to spot one of my favorite pieces of furniture. It's tucked in a corner on the east side, and you can see how they created beautiful depth using multiple woods, angles, and inlays, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I also want to see in the British art area, you may see and spot a bird in the English tea set. When you head over on the west side of the museum, you're going to see a Native American art room. The curator in this space tried to show the long tradition of art making with the Native American people with modern and ancient artists. So here on the left, you'll see a traditional piece. And then here right next to it, you'll see a modern piece where they're wearing exactly the same thing, but painting it with a modern person holding a cell phone. Another example of this is you'll see these traditional moccasins with these tiny little glass beads that were actually, they would get these glass beads from trading with European settlers who got them from Europe. And then you'll see a modern shoe, and you see these traditional women's high heel shoes, and they are beaded, and that's just so cool. You'll also see some scalping, which is really interesting, that was attached to a jacket. And there's a lot of Native American ceramics and pottery that you'll see. How did they fire these? Well, they would dig them underground and in a large fire pit, and sometimes there would be some discoloration. But as they would take them out, how they would make them shiny is they would rub it with these little stones until they would kind of make this dull sheen. But there is no glaze on these pieces. And at the very end of your tour, after lunch, we're going to check out some of the stuff outside.